The Starladder Budapest Major begins this Monday, and that means all anyone could talk about is who might be taking away the grand prize, capping off the season and 2025 as a whole. There are many teams threatening to take this major. Most people agree this might be one of the most open and up for grabs majors in recent memory, which means we're going to sit down today and do some power rankings. Who are the contenders? Who are the pretenders? And who are the teams you should be watching out as things begin on Monday? And for once, I'm not alone. I'm joined again by Dust, who's going to help me break down what are the real teams and what are the fake teams going to the Budapest Major. Dust, how are you doing?
Doing great, man. I think you set it up pretty well there, that it does seem wide open. I mean, it's just so far been a pretty big season of parity, right? We had the season last season where Vitality won everything practically. But this season, I think we've had like 7 or 8 unique winners, depending on the tier of tournament that you want to go by. So it's very interesting stuff for sure.
Yep. So we're going to sit down today. We're going to rank all 32 teams. We're going to put them into a tier list and give you guys all the information you need to know heading into stage 1. If you guys enjoy this kind of content, you can show them by leaving a like, leave a comment down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Help me in 10K subs by the end of the year. We are so close to hitting that goal, and I think we can accomplish that during the duration of this major. But also, do me a solid. Dust is going to be linked in the description down below. Also, I believe with the collab feature, you should be able just to click straight over to his channel. Go follow Dust. He's going to be putting out a lot of content for the major as well. And he's also very close to hitting 5,000 subscribers. So if you can help him do that, I would greatly appreciate it. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. All right, guys, right at the top real quick, I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping. The major is starting on Monday. And here in the US, that's also going to be Thanksgiving week. So I'm going to be spending the holiday with my family. So as per with the Austin major, I covered every single day of the major as it was going on. For stage 1, I'll probably condense that down to 1, maybe 2 videos until the holiday break is over, just to give you guys an idea of what's going to be happening on the channel in the future. With that being said, tier list is on screen. Now, we're not going to go into painstaking detail of all 32 teams, because at the end of the day, Dust, there are just a bunch of teams who are happy to be here, but they are not looking to take the title home. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, there's a lot of teams, even with this major being wide open, there's a lot of teams who are just happy to be there for some sticker money. You know what I mean?
And so we're going to lay down those teams kind of quickly and then move on to the teams that are going to be worthwhile for you to pay attention to. So as far as teams that are just zero shot to win the major, we have teams like Rare Atom, Red Canids, the Huns, NRG, Passion UA, Lin Vision, MIBR, Fluxo, Imperial, FlyQuest, and Astralis. And I just decided to make it a joke. If any of these teams win the major, I will shave my head. I'll go bald. Like, it is so improbable that I'm willing to bet every ounce of hair on my head that it will not happen.
I think it's a pretty safe bet. I think you're fine with that one.
Yeah.
I don't foresee you going bald over this.
Yeah, and like some of these teams, you know, they're interesting. They can do some individual damage in stage 1 and 2. Like a FlyQuest is a team I expect to actually do pretty well through the first stage of the major. A team like Passion UA can be interesting. Same with like Lin Vision. But at the end of the day, once we start getting into more of the like true contenders, these teams are going to fall off. Lin Vision is a good example of that. They did really well through the first 2 stages of the Austin major and then fell off a cliff when the competition got serious.
Yeah, and I just think in general, they have kind of struggled. So I do not foresee them even making anywhere near the playoffs, to be honest with you. So yeah, I think this is a pretty fair list that you've got so far for sure.
Yeah.
Especially with the whole energy situation also kind of added a wrinkle. Not that they were going to make the playoffs anyway.
Yeah, that's actually fair to
losing their IGR between the event. This is why I think that, you know, every organization now, because I don't know how this is going to go. You might have to edit this out.
Okay.
I'm just worried. So, you know, we have performance coaches and like, you know, head coach. Probably should have someone on staff that like says, look, you are not allowed to have sex between this month and this month. Because if you do, you might have a child there in the major.
Okay.
And like we need to like, you know, just like have like black months where you're just not allowed like dark months. You know,
I feel like I have to say this. You're just ripping off a Moses tweet, Dust. Like
is it?
Yeah, he beat you to the draw on that one. This is not this is not straight out Dust's mental asylum. Moses already made this tweet.
Dang it. Well, Moses is a really smart guy, so I'm not surprised. And shout out to Moses one time.
All right, fair enough. NRG, you can't. Nitro's not allowed to have more sex after this. Not within the 9-month window of the major. That's got to be the new rule going forward.
It's a rule for all players. Just, you know,
well,
you have
thankfully,
major aspirations.
most of those players I think are fine in that regard. I don't think there's a lot going on in the bedroom for most Counter-Strike players.
Damn.
You know, call it how I see it. Straight shooter. The tier above, I will literally go bald. These are the teams that are just kind of happy to be here. they're better than the teams below them on the whole, but also like the best you can expect is maybe they take like 1 or 2 good wins. They're not really going to threaten to like make a playoff run. They're going to be just kind of okay. And teams in this tier you can expect to see are like Pain Gaming. They're good. They can make a playoff, but it's like outside looking in. The Mongols, they're just happy to be here. They're happy to be at least somewhat competitive without Senzu. M80, the good NA team, they can definitely do some damage, but are they going to go super deep? Probably not. You have NIP, who are a team that a lot of people, including myself, really like, but they're a bit young, they're unproven. Do they really have the star power to make like a super deep run? Who knows? Paravision, they have Jame. That's about it. Bait are kind of like perennially a great like tier 1.5 team, but like they're not quite good enough to break into like the top 10 proper. FaZe are dealing with the millstone that is Brokey and Jacob. Fnatic are BlameF and nobody else. And then Tyloo, they won one of the major. And I call it, we can circle back to that in a second. That's my opinion.
All right.
Tyloo, they're actually one of the teams who won a title this year. They won at it was not Fisher Playground. Fisher Playground won. So they won a pretty stacked event, but afterwards kind of failed to repeat that form.
Stacked is a little bit optimistic.
It was a relatively good event.
Yeah, I mean they played Virtus Pro, Astralis, and 3D Max, so it's not they weren't beaten up on big name teams, but they still did well enough. I'll give them that. And Saul was another one they had at that event. So
yep,
it was a good win. It was a good like tier 1.5, tier 2 win.
So are there any of those teams there that kind of specifically you wanted to hone in on? Obviously the BlameF thing kind of caught you off guard with Fnatic.
I just think Jumbo's also worth shouting out on Fnatic. I think he's a pretty solid player, and I think he's got room to grow as a player down the line. But you're right, as far as the overall team, I don't see them doing a whole hell of a lot. I just want to point out, too, one, it's just sad Mongols is here, right? Yeah. Because Mongols would have been a contender had the whole roster situation with Senzu had not happened. Yeah, absolutely. Like, they would have been bordering. They wouldn't have been a favorite, let's be honest. But they would have been towards the top. I mean, they were a top 5 team in the world for a long time. Yeah. Basically ever since the last major, when they made the grand finals in Austin, they've been pretty much a top 5 ranked team since then. So it is very sad to see, how far they have slipped. But that is just reality with controls. I don't expect them to. They likely won't even make playoffs, honestly.
Yeah, and the sad part is they were a team that was getting better in the playoffs over the course of the season. So like
absolutely
against a team like Maus, who they deserve their spot in the contender category, spoiler alert, but are a team that I'm not very confident in. If it was like Maus versus the Mongols with Senzu, I'm kind of taking the Mongols. Like it could have been a really interesting wrinkle for this major.
Also, like, I know people are going to say, like, well, what about the FaZe Magic, right? They were able to, make it to some playoffs they weren't supposed to make in the past at majors. And they do have Twist and Frozen as a wonderful rifling combo. Brokey, if he, like, somehow has a magical return to form at the major, like he has in a previous major, at the Shanghai major, he did the exact same BS, where he, like, had some crazy return to form alongside Rain to help propel them to a grand finals they should have never been in. Yep. So, like, you could almost do like a separate category of like, if they're up to their bullshit, something could happen, and like that is probably where you have to put FaZe. Like, if the FaZe magic happens, he's like pending FaZe magic, just up to some bullshit, or like FaZe magic category.
FaZe bullshit.
The FaZe bullshit category. That's where they're at. Like we'll go ahead and throw them in there.
They get their own category.
I like that one. Yeah, I like that one quite a lot, actually. And then other than that, also, shout out to you for being bold for putting Pain here, because after glazing Brazilian, teams for the last few weeks that we both have been doing with Furia, we have to counterbalance it, Brazilians. Like, there has to be some level of balance, and so we have to put Pain here.
Well, and the reality is, I've several times on this channel, I've been a Pain defender. I actually really like Biguzera. I like the system. I think Pain have a lot of interesting pieces. It's just they're an incredibly hard team to project. They seem so up and down like every tournament they go to. Like, obviously they weren't that good going into the Austin Major. They made top 8 there. So they are top 4. Yeah, sorry, excuse me. So they're one of those teams that, like, if there's like a disaster in stage 3, like Maus bomb out of the groups, which probably not gonna happen, but it could. Pain are like one of those teams where they are, to me, most likely to move out of happy to be here into like, oh, we made the playoffs. Like, that's possible. It's just it's like the least possible compared to the other teams that have yet to be put onto the list.
I agree. Very unlikely to make the playoffs again.
And then on FaZe, I am Kerrigan's biggest defender. That is what I am, a FaZe glazer to the very end. I have done everything I can to defend FaZe. I just don't think they'll be able to find FaZe magic this time. I don't know if there's enough in the tank for FaZe magic. And really, I think this boils down to the fact that Twist is playing like a top 5 player in the world. But is that like just a honeymoon period? Will he come back down? And then I can't put any more faith in Brokey. I've run out of my ability to have Brokey copium. It's just there's no more in the tank.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I was just doing it for the memes, to be honest.
It's possible. The thing, it's Schrodinger's phase. They could. They absolutely could. It would shock nobody and everybody at the same time.
I mean, they have enough firepower to carry him through stage 1 for sure, in my opinion. Once you get to stage 2, I think they still have a shot to make it to stage 3. But then that's probably where their run ends, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's just you don't know. It's phase magic is the eternal. Just you can't predict it. So with that, those are the teams that most likely don't have a shot. Pretty much every other team from here on, you could make an argument for making the playoffs or better. And as we get higher, you're more likely getting to teams that are threatening to win the major. And so we're talking about dark horses now. These are teams that maybe haven't proven it so far with their results this season, but there's something in how they play, maybe it's the personnel, recent roster moves, that are worth you paying attention, because if they hit the ground running, maybe momentum can carry them further than anyone expected. And I feel like the first team to talk about in that regard is Team Liquid, as they are kind of like similar to FaZe. They are so hard to predict, and they are so often like below the level what you expect for the names on the roster. But if everything clicks, they get so much more dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously the one that's out there saying they're so back and then immediately saying they're not back. It's basically the very next series live on stream, you know, at 100%. These last couple of events that I was working at that they were attending. So, you know, obviously the crowd out there knows kind of where I stand with them. And it's one of those things where it's like for a long time now, we've just looked at the roster on paper and said, surely this team has to do something, right? Like you have Shuhei, who still has a lot of, you know, reputation as being a top IGL. Maybe that will pass, you know, in some time if they continue to struggle. But for right now, I think he still has that rep. Obviously, Bubblesj is a star entry fragger. I know he had a very poor tournament at Masters Bucharest individually, but that seemed like kind of an anomaly compared to what he normally does as an individual, right? And then you do have, you know, Naf having a return to form this season, and the fact that nertz is not that far removed from being a star level player. You know, when he first joined Liquid, he did look hot, and obviously he was a fantastic player, you know, on Heroic and Ints back in the day. So it's like, man, if they could just make the pieces work, they should have all the talent possible to make a playoff run, in my opinion. But you have a team that simultaneously, you know, beat Legacy and made the playoffs of PGO Masters Bucharest only to get a collective 2 rounds across 2 maps and a loss to Saul. So it's like that in itself, that one little snippet of info I just gave you shows you the... Yeah, it just shows you like the on-off switch that they have. Like the ceiling is kind of high for them, I think, just overall skill, but the floor is so low, bro.
Yeah, the
way
floor is
too
in
low.
hell.
Absolutely.
And the weird part, kind of the weird thing to consider is they haven't played an official match in a month. The Masters Bucharest ended on November 1st, so they didn't play anything else before the major. So that means they've had a lot of time to boot camp and kind of reconsider what might have went wrong. And that adds an extra schism, because it also means they could be really well prepped, but maybe they come into the event starting off cold because they haven't played many officials in the last couple of weeks. I feel like that kind of further adds to kind of the randomness of Team Liquid. But as much as, like, I'm an Bubblesj stan. I love Bubblesj. He is one of my favorite games to watch. He's such an aesthetically pleasing player. It's hard for me to not, like, want to overrate Team Liquid. Like, I expect more, and I keep expecting more.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I saw some positive signs from them. Like, again, Nas had a return to form. Bubblesj is still entering pretty well on the T side, and his CT sides do look better on this team overall compared to FaZe. So, I mean, you're seeing some positive things in individual form. Unfortunately, they have some issues, though. Like, you know, nertz has struggled, let's be honest. You know, Ultimate is a wild incredibly, he is an incredibly up and down player. He can be super flashy, have mega impact, but he can also have games where he looks like he's totally missing, right? And I think from a macro sense, I think the roles are correct. I think the way they've set up their default roles make a lot of sense. But on the micro level, like, they fall apart in mid and late rounds sometimes where there's not on the same page. You know, people are overextending without trade potential, or people are just kind of doing things on their own where, you know, not everyone else seems to be ready for it. And that is stuff that, you know, maybe just reps and practice can kind of iron out as they get to know each other better and, like, kind of shape up some protocols, because they had to hit the ground running with this roster, right? I mean, they immediately went to like 3 tournaments as soon as they picked up Bubblesj with no real prep time in between each one.
That's fair.
So hopefully this is the time to catch up and figure that stuff out and get them on track. And if they do, I think they are a team that could make playoffs for sure.
Yep. So after that, I'm going to talk about a team that I think is really interesting in this field, and that's going to be Legacy. Legacy are a fantastic, they to me kind of scream archetypical dark horse in the sense that they are a team that would have to punch so far above their weight. It'd be like one of the miracle stories of the major. But at the same time, they've kind of proven they can do that. They are like a sneaky, just good core of players. They got really good talent all the way down. They play a very scrappy, like aggressive style of play. And then they're so clutch. Like the clutch factor is arguably one of the best amongst any team in the top 10.
Yeah, I like this team a lot. I think they've grown a lot as a team. I think that at first it seemed like their run at the Blast Austin Major from stage 1 all the way to stage 3 was a flash in the pan. Especially because right afterwards they didn't qualify for Blast Open London. They didn't do very well at that Fisher Playground 2 event that they attended. Even their EPL stage 1 event, while they beat Furia, they still didn't make it to the main stage. And so it's like, all right, maybe they've run out of gas, or this is just the level that they're at. They're just kind of in that, kind of the same spot 3D Max are in, which we'll talk about later, where it's just like you're kind of a 9th to 12th place team. Like you're just kind of in that range. You're not quite able to make playoffs, but you're not half bad either, right? But then they were able to make 2 grand finals in a row and win a tournament against some decent competition, right?
Yep.
I mean, they beat 3D Max and Heroic multiple times to win CAC. And then at Masters Bucharest, they were able to, take Aurora to the limits in a best of 5 grand final.
Should have beat them, in all honesty. They should have beat Aurora. That was a series they had won.
So they started putting some results on the board that made you kind of think about them a little bit differently. And they do have some talented players. I think Dumal's a great wild card aggressive rifler. I think Lotto's an extremely versatile and a consistent rifler. Lux, I think, has done a great job reinventing himself as an IGL on this team and actually surpassing his former master Big Uzair over on Pain and climbing the rankings. And he's actually a pretty good fragger in the IGL slot as well. A very aggressive guy in his own right. So they have a lot of things going for them. I definitely think that they can make the playoffs of this tournament.
Yeah. And if nothing else, they're like, if this was a tier list based on like favorite teams to watch, Legacy would be towards the top. They are so fun to watch. So if you're someone who's like, you're more casual, you're not super tapped into everything going on in Pro Counter-Strike, Legacy games are a great one to tune into and just have something entertaining happen. They always put on a good show. It is a great way to describe them.
Yeah, they're an explosive, action-packed team, similar to Furia, but just not quite as polished, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's actually a perfect description. Afterwards, I think a team that people are going to be quick to underrate at this major, but it's just hard for me to get over their just like average standard of quality is Na'Vi. And really, the deference for Na'Vi just comes down to the fact that I have a lot of time in the day for Alexi B and Blade and their system and their discipline. This is a team that is not doing well in terms of overall firepower, but like Makaze has their moments. Emma doesn't have them as often, but he still does. Bit is still an incredible anchor. Wonderful has been, I think, much more consistent this season. This is another one of those teams that, like, if they can they get that momentum going out the gate. I think they're in stage 2. If they can start off stage 2 strong, I think they can actually be a really hard team to beat.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. They struggled the first season of this year heavily.
Yes.
Then they obviously went through the roster transition with JL stepping down and Makaze coming in. And that kind of shuffled a couple of roles around a little bit with Ema and then what Makaze was wanting to do. And I mean, they hit the ground running. They came top 4 at Cologne and they beat Mongols to do it.
Yep.
And after that, though, they struggled the next couple of events, but then they won a smaller event at Star Series. Over NIP and Passion UA and stuff like that. So not a big field, but at least taking care of business and doing what they're supposed to do. And then they've had a couple of decent finishes since then, but Chengdu was kind of a slap in the face, right? Getting knocked out by Astralis and Heroic and not getting a single win at that tournament, I think was not the best parting shot going into the major.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people. But look, I mean, I think you're right. I think that Bit is still a world-class, anchor and role player. I do think you're right. I think Wonderful has been better this season. And Makaze has an X factor to him, but it's just the consistency's not there. But to be expected, he is not that far removed from being on their academy team, playing against a much different level of competition. So yeah, I mean, I still have a lot of love for the team because of, the Alexi B, Blade brain trust and the fact that they do have a couple of skilled players. I don't think playoffs are out of the question. I don't know that I would. I think they're kind of almost in a similar spot to Shanghai, where I feel like they're going to hit that 9th to 12th spot. Like, I feel like that's probably where they're going to be.
Yeah.
But I like put it this way: I have more faith in Legacy making playoffs than Navi.
The interesting thing I think to take into account when considering the dark horses is that the contenders and the favorites, there's 5 teams there. That means there's 3 slots up for grabs in the playoffs that aren't like reserved for the teams that we feel like are pretty much guaranteed to go through. So there's a lot of room there. There's a lot of room for a team like Navi to squeak in as like maybe one of the last playoff teams to qualify.
Yeah, I think they're on the bubble of playoff qualification.
I would say right there with them is Aurora. And Aurora pretty much revolves around how much can they limit the damage of Major being just a despotic T-side caller. Like, how much can they get around the fact that if things get close on the second half T-side and Zontaras is not swinging into every headshot like he is Jesus Christ, this team struggles to get much of anything done on those T-sides. If the firepower delivers and Wakadia, Woxic, and Zontaras are just shooting, then like the like potential of Aurora goes way up. But they're kind of like how we were describing Team Liquid's floors in hell. Whatever's below hell is like Aurora's potential when they don't play to their standard.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing they have going for them is that they're off the back of a win, so that might be somewhat of like a confidence booster. And if there was any type of internal, bickering or, just turmoil in general within the team, which is very possible, even kind of heard some inklings that they were having some issues with each other and there was some anger issues going on between players and stuff like that, which is to be understandable when you're struggling throughout the course of the season. You can't figure things out. Eventually frustration is going to build up and you're going to have that happen. But maybe something like winning that Masters Bucharest event will help iron out a little bit of that going into their preparations for the major. I mean, yes, they do have enough firepower to make a playoff run. There's no doubt about it.
No doubt.
If I think obviously Woxic's the one where it's like sometimes he's on, sometimes he's off, and that's the one I feel like you have to worry about the most. I'm also worried a lot about Joda because I feel like he was a very strong, star player when they picked him up, and he hit the ground running pretty well, but he has struggled lately. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, Wakadia has stepped up his game compared to, last year. Like, he's been great this year, and obviously Zantaris is one of the best entry fraggers in the world and a great aggressive CT player. So they have the talent. You kind of hit something with the in-game leadership, and I think that is something to worry about. Is kind of their tactics can be a little bit readable.
Sure.
That's the nicest way to put it.
Charitable way to put it. Yeah,
it's a charitable way to put it. But I mean, sometimes even if you're readable, if you have enough talent and you trade efficiently, you can still make it work.
Yeah. I mean, that's like the upside, right? Is they'll hit the same bomb site like 5 times in a row, but like if they're just banging your head off, what are you gonna do? Like there's games where they're just unstoppable in that regard, and that's like the upside of the the Aurora system in that regard. It's just when they get into scrappy close games, that's where I'm just like I'm sitting there, I'm like I fucking hate watching this team play T-sides. Like them and Mouse are like my 2 least favorite T-side watches in the world, and shocker, they have similar T-side win rates for the last 6 months.
I mean, even if you just want to get past that and be a little bit more broad, their map pool is in shambles right now.
Yeah, map pool is also diabolical. Yeah,
I think the only two maps that they really have going for them right now are Dust 2 and Nuke. And then after that, it's like they're Inferno. They've lost their last 5 out of 6 games. They're 3-3 in their last 6 games when Overpass.
Mirage is total coin flip too.
They don't play Ancient, so it's like they're in a rough spot. I mean, they're the team that got hit the most when Anubis came out the map pool.
I am surprised the team with Zontaras doesn't play Ancient. That's like a bizarre. I never really thought about that. This is an aggressive team that doesn't play Ancient. That's really weird.
Yeah, I don't know. Their train is also very hit or miss. So it's like there's only like 2 or 3 maps I'm confident that they can play to a high level consistently, and I think that's also going to be worrisome when you get into the best of 3s. But again, I feel like they're in a similar spot.
He's got to respect the firepower.
They're almost even with Legacy for me for like getting that 7th to 8th slot into the playoffs, but maybe just a step behind Legacy in my opinion in current form.
I think that's fair. Okay, so our last 3 teams in the Dark Horses, I think, are kind of like, they are the, I would say, least likely to make playoffs, but they have reasons to consider them. And first off, we have Gamer Legion. And Gamer Legion, they are just kind of consistent, top 15 team in the world. They put on good performances in a lot of group stages, but don't always find the ability to make playoffs. You have Rez and PR, who are a great rifling duo. You have the kind of the added nuance of Hypex coming into the roster recently as their new opper. He's been kind of up and down. ZTR, I think, is a good IGL, but is he like really developing to be one of the best in the world? I think that's definitely up in the air. Then you have Ash, who is still one of the best coaches in the world. So there's like a lot to like about Gamer Legion, but it feels like they are one of those teams that really struggle to put it all together.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point to make. I will say this, like, I do think PR was like a rookie of the year candidate in a rifling role until Maladoy came around and just said,
unfortunate about that
that'll
one.
be mine. So, I mean, PR definitely, you know, is fantastic. I think Rez has had a nice, like, second win to his career on this team and does a great job. I'll shout out Towson really quick, though, too. This guy has evolved so much this year. You know, I think when he first joined the team, his first event was a Shanghai Major. That's a tough, you know, that's thrown into the fire right away, right? And he didn't do very well at that event, if we're honest, and kind of struggled through some of the first, you know, part of the first season. But this season, and even kind of the tail end of last season, has really picked up his game and actually is a really good role player. So I think they have one of the stronger rifling cores, like, of the teams in stage 1, which is, you know, where they're going to be beginning their major at. So I like that a lot for them. They did just come off the back of a, you know, a better land performance at Masters Bucharest after a very tough season where they were coming dead last, like 2 or 3 tournaments in a row, basically. It was looking very, very grim. Yeah, I mean, it kind of sucks because I had a lot of high hopes for them whenever they were having those 5th, 6th place finishes at Dallas and Melbourne. I was like, okay, like, you know, this is an interesting team, but then they just struggled with results this season. Their map pool has struggled.
The revolving door on the Opera has been probably their biggest issue.
And then they still haven't found one that performs consistently, even after going through 3 different Operas, basically. So it's like, that is a worry. Their map pool, similar to Aurora, is also a worry. But I do think they're a team that will most certainly make it past stage 1. Very likely will make it past stage 2. Playoffs might be a little bit of out of reach, in my opinion, though.
Yeah. And kind of an interesting schism, just to kind of put this in as like a food for thought for the comment section. If you're looking at this tier list and you're like, well, I kind of like a team like Pain or even like NIP and Bait better than a Gamer Legion, I think those arguments are open. Like these last couple teams in the Dark Horses are very close to other teams lower on the tier list that you can make those arguments. It's kind of just like the interesting, like the parity past like the top 10 to top 20 in the world is like really, really close. That's a big thing I think we should highlight. So there's a lot of other teams here that you could, if just based on kind of like personal preference or what maybe you see in those players, you could argue ahead of a team like Gamer Legion.
Yeah, it really depends on what matches they get for me in stage 3 to determine whether or not they'll make playoffs or not.
Yes, I would agree with that. And then we have G2. G2 obviously had that fantastic win in it was Lisbon or London, correct?
It was a win at London. You are correct.
Yeah, London, Lisbon, they blur together in my mind. So they won that big best of 5 grand finals. It was like the big coming out moment for Hunters and IGL. Heavy God had this massive tournament, and suddenly we're like, fuck, G2, they might be cooking. Could this become like a perennial, 7th, 6th team in the world? But then they've really struggled to kind of reproduce those results afterwards in subsequent tournaments, and they've kind of been on a little bit of a downtrend. However, I have to give a lot of respect to that win in London, and the fact that there's just a lot of like fun players in this team. We haven't seen G2 at many events recently, so I think that they could go away, hit the boot camp, kind of sharpen up their form. They come into the major. If they play close to how they did in London, then suddenly things get really interesting, and they could make a run.
Yeah, I mean, I think they started off well at Cologne with a top 8 finish, including going over Fury and 3D Max to do it. Like, I thought that was like a nice like debut event with this new lineup with Sun Pius and Madison and their coach Saul. Bumps in the road after that, but then, as you said, had a big pop-off moment where they won a tournament over Furia and Vitality. And then even at the Fisher Playground 2 event where they came top 8, they got knocked out by Mongols. Like, fair enough, you can shake that one off. That at that point in time, Mongols was still, kind of at
a real team,
a high level. Yeah, exactly. And then EPL, they got knocked out by back-to-back losses to Spirit and Vitality. So it's like tough schedule. You know what I mean?
Real tough.
And they also got knocked out by Vitality at Chengdu as well. And they didn't even have Hunter playing that game because he was sick. They had Saul standing in for that.
Yep, that's
and
right.
I think that kind of makes the Chengdu result almost seem irrelevant because they weren't even able to field their full 5 in that final game that mattered. So yeah, I think that you are correct. They had a huge high at London. You are correct. They weren't able to follow it up as well as they would have wanted to. But I would say that, again, they're only losing to like Vitality and Spirit since that tournament. And then the loss to Mongols. So I think of all the teams in the Dark Horse category, this is a team most likely to make playoffs.
Okay. Yeah, you know what? The more you lay it out, the more I'm inclined to agree with you on that. And even just kind of think about one layer deeper, while Sunpius hasn't really gone back to kind of his like peak powers, he's still been relatively good and good in like very important matches too, especially in playoffs. He's been a lot better in playoffs. And then Maddie's has been incredible. Malbs is a great entry and aggressive player. And then Heavy God, it feels like he's close to making a bid at like the best anchor in the world.
Yeah, I don't really disagree with anything that you just said. I think, Malbs has had some struggles with form, if we're honest, this year.
Been up and down.
I think a lot of people were kind of hoping that he was going to be able to quote unquote step into Nico's roles and hit the ground running, and it really hasn't panned out that way. But I think if you kind of just look at things lately, his main job is still helping create openings, and he's not bad at that, right?
Yeah.
And, I just think that defensively he struggled, and just overall he hasn't really been at the same level that you had hoped he would be. But you're right, Mattis has been a strong addition to the team. I think Hunter's actually fragging pretty decent for an IGL, so that's always nice to have that little bit of added bonus firepower. And yeah, they have some results to back them up lately, and they have, I think, a great system behind them, with Saul coming in as the coach. And, I think Hunter, it was a natural transition for him to go to the IGL role. So, and you're right about Heavy God. I mean, he is one of the best players in his particular role in the game right now. So yeah, I like them to make playoffs a lot, actually.
Yeah. And another one of those teams that I think deserves a shout out as just being really fun to watch. Like, they are just another kind of scrappy team. Maddie's can be just explosive on the T sides, and Heavy God he can just do everything. Like, he picks up the op sometimes, does well with it. He can clutch, he can entry. Like, he's one of those players, like, his best player comparison is he's a lot like Rob's, where he has like no real weak spot in his game, which makes him just super entertaining in just about any situation.
Yeah, he's kind of an extremity playmaker. Like, that's what, like, I think there's a difference between like an extremity guy who is like a very passive lurker and like a true anchor, and then someone who's like a legit playmaker on the extremities of the map. And so, PR is kind of an example of this. Kaspersky's done that a little bit for NIP. There's a couple other guys you'd probably name that kind of fit that mold. And I think Heavy God does. I mean, you have to remember, there were times in his career where Heavy God played like more entry, like proactive roles, as opposed to what he's doing right now on G2. So he's an incredibly flexible rifler who can really play well in any stage of the round. But on this team with this configuration, it makes sense for him to kind of, play the more passive end of the spectrum. But when his number gets called and he has to make a play, he still can do it. So yeah, I think Heavy God is definitely a guy we're going to be talking about for years to come. And yeah, overall, I like this team quite a lot.
Yep. And right now, our last dark horse, it is 3D Max. And 3D Max are normally one of those teams where they get the knock into the dark horse category, because the one thing I think 3D Max is better at than a lot of other teams is their floor is just not that low. They play to a very good average level, and their strategies, their T sides are consistently well above the competition for teams similarly ranked to them. They just run such an efficient system as a team. And so they're very good at not giving up upsets. And when you're just good at not allowing upsets to lower ranked teams, you're going to naturally find yourselves deeper into group stages, threatening to make playoffs than a lot of your other competitors.
This is a tough one for me, because on the one hand, I do think tactically speaking, this is one of the best teams out there strategically. Like, if Maui made this hot point one time, and you probably remember this,
yes,
where he's like, if you took 3D Max's strats and gave it to Aurora's players, they could be a top 5 team in the world.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's far off. Like, I do think that the way 3D Max plays the game, and even with the gravity transitioning to the IGL role, in place of Maka, I think that they have a similar overall system to back then, but they've even added like some quicker reactionary plays that they can make in like the mid round to snap on the stuff a little bit more rapidly. They have great utility usage and layering. They have well-defined roles. They can play fast and slow. Like, they have a very well-rounded game, and they also have, in general, a pretty well-rounded map pool as far as the maps that they're capable of playing. For me, and this has been the case for a while, is I just don't think they have enough firepower, man. At the end of, like, they have enough firepower to compete against like the lower end top 10 teams and other teams within the top 15. But if you're trying to challenge for like, a top 5 spot in the world, let's say, they just don't have it. Like, if you run through this roster, every player that's on this team is, good to decent, but none of them are a star player. Like, if you were making an international team and you were picking players from this roster, they would be like, hopefully your 3rd or 4th best player on your roster. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're literally a team full of 3rd or 4th best players on a top tier team. Unfortunately.
Yeah, that's kind of one of those, like, they're, well, what's the saying? They're greater than the sum of their parts. Like they
exactly.
produce results better than what the players on the page would suggest. I think the best way I could put it, with this being kind of like you have 5 teams that are really strong, almost guaranteed to make playoffs. We have 3 slots kind of left over from there for the top 8. If it comes down to like a final day of stage 3, it's the 2-2 best of 3, and it's 3D Max against a team like, you know, Navi, Aurora, Gamer Legion. 3D Max they can win those they can win that match against like another dark horse to make the playoffs. And that's kind of like, that is their condition to get in. They wouldn't be like a 3-0 team or a 3-1 team. They'd be coming in on the last day against another like lower ranked team.
I just feel like they've been stuck in that 9th to 12th place position forever, bro.
That's
like
fair.
The only exceptions are when they came top 8 at EPL and when they obviously came second at CAC. Pretty much everything else, it's like 9th to 12th place, 12th to 14th place. Like, it's just happened so many times throughout the course of this year. And it's just like they're hard stuck there. And even with the whole IGL swap, it's not like Maka is fragging that much better than he was when he was IGLing. So you didn't really get a buff in that regard. I mean, Body's a solid entry fragger. I'll give it to him. Like, he's probably the strongest player on the team as far as like the role he plays and the numbers he puts out. Like, yeah, he's pretty solid. I think Maka is a decent opper, but you're going to put him lower on the pecking order than almost any other team you'd rank above them.
That's true.
And then I think Exercise is just kind of flaky. Like, sometimes he can have big moments, sometimes he can be a miss. Same kind of with Lucky. So it's just like, I think firepower's an issue for them, but like you said, they are a team that to some of their parts is pretty solid and good enough to, like you said, they're on that bubble. They're in that 2-3 or 3-2 game in stage 3.
Yeah. And so with the dark horse out of the way, we move into the 5 teams that are firm contenders. And obviously not all contenders are created equal. And I feel like the first place I want to start here is probably the team with maybe the most variance going into the major, the team that's going to be kind of the hardest to predict. That's actually going to be Team Spirit. And
that's fair.
Team Spirit, the big thing is we all know that Donk and Shiro can win any game on any day against any opponent. Like, that is the potential when you have Donk as the best player in the world, one of the best talents Counter-Strike's ever produced, and Shiro, who just seems incapable of dropping below a 1.25 in any given tournament. His floor is just so insanely consistent. The big problem for Spirit has been, after winning Cologne and Blast Bounty back-to-back, they have just been shaky since the introduction of Tenier, and Zwei has not worked. They've perpetually kind of stumbled with these inclusions, and then Donk has, for the first time in his career, had a noticeable slip in form. I'll add an immediate caveat that at their last tournament before the major, this past event, Hong Kong, thank you. Sorry, my brain just destroyed itself for a second. At Hong Kong, I thought they looked better compared to the previous couple events. They looked better in that series against Vitality. It was a winnable series against Vitality. Donk looked better against Vitality in that moment. And that gives me some hope that maybe they can figure it out for the major. But it feels like Zwei and Tenier are going to continue to be an issue. And if Donk is even remotely human being below a 1.3, then they're going to struggle a lot more than they probably should.
Yeah, this is a tough one. It really is, because you're right. Donk is still the best player in the world. Shiro is one of the best operators in the world. So you definitely have that going for you. Outside of that, though, it gets a little bit tough, because I do think Chopper's like another guy who's kind of under the gun, under the microscope, you know, as an IGL, and kind of wondering if, you know, he's actually calling the most optimal CS, or, you know, there's just no clear upgrade, though, for him, right? And I don't think that they play completely terrible Counter-Strike. I think right now what you see a little bit, if I'm just, you know, taking broad strokes, is that they just look a little sloppy and on the same page. You know, I think that there is, like, their spacing's not as tight as it used to be. Some of their trade potential is not as high as it used to be, because some of that spacing and timing is off between some of their players. Yeah, I just think that the protocols just don't seem in place. They just don't seem polished, and part of that could just be because of the moving parts of bringing in Zoltanier and how much time they've had to kind of work them in. But I'll be honest with you, I'm almost done with Zwei at this point. You know, I think this is like last chance saloon for him, in my opinion. Like, we need to see something out of him this major. And I wasn't even against the idea of not even using him this major and just bringing Magix or Zontix back. Like, I don't want to say fully hit the panic button, but like, I think that's a legitimate thing that they probably should have considered, at least. Not saying that they should definitely do that, but at least consider it, maybe. Tenier, he's only played 2 tournaments with them, so I'll give him more time, but it is sad to see how much he's fallen from what I saw from him on Heroic, where he looked like a legit star player. And he seems like he plays the roles that would be complementary to Donk and Shiro, where he's not as aggressive as Donk, and he's not as passive as Shiro, and he just kind of fits right in the middle as far as like what his rifling role is on a team. I would have thought that would have been a great core 3 to build around talent-wise. And they have a great map pool. They have one of the better map pools in this tournament.
Yeah.
So I think playoffs is still very likely to happen. I think how far they run in the playoffs will very much come to who do they play in the quarterfinals. I think that's going to be kind of their limit.
Yeah, because, I mean, the reality is that they just don't seem to be able to beat Falcons or Vitality. So if they get a bracket draw against one of them early, that kind of feels like it'll be wraps. Falcons especially seems to just be like an insurmountable matchup for Donk and Shiro specifically. And I feel like that's more so because Shiro just is such an antithesis to m0NESY that gives m0NESY a lot of freedom, more so than it is like, I mean, obviously the community narrative is like Nico counters Donk. I don't really think that that's like the truest version of it. I really do think it's more m0NESY is just so well equipped to stop them. But either way, Falcons and Vitality are the nightmare matchup. So if they get those guys, it kind of feels like that's the end of the tournament right there.
Yeah. I think the moment that they meet Vitality or Falcons, they're in a lot of trouble. Although they could, in theory, beat both of them.
Donk. It's the Donk effect. It's like you have to consider that in every game.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes Donk and Shiro are enough, as long as the other guys aren't totally enting, like totally just like bombing out. Like if they can just play decent CS, and those two can play at their best level, this team could win the whole tournament, right?
The hard part about Zwei, and so if you guys saw my community post, I kind of canned the Spirit video I was working on because I kept on swirling the drain and not really having like enough thoughts to feel like I could make like a video produced to like the quality I expect of myself. But when it came down to thinking about Spirit, the more I watched Zwei's POVs, the thing that stands out the most is like, not that he makes a whole lot of mistakes. Like his aim is good. Like he's a good mechanical player. The amount of times on like CT sides, he'll die just out of position, just caught in the open, back to the enemy. He'll just die in random spots, like where it just looks like what are you looking at? What is communicating to you in that moment that makes you look this way? Like he just has some just inexplainable deaths, and that will cost Spirit in a lot of rounds. And then the contrast to that is like that Mirage against Vitality on the CT side, where he was positioning himself better. You saw the results. He had that huge 3K to put them into overtime. He had just a good average performance on that map. If we can get more like that version his way, then Spirit look a lot scarier. But he just struggles to reproduce those results, and I don't really see him doing much of anything on T sides most of the time. It just feels like it's just a bust. I can't see this move working out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to sum it up is like they have all the mechanical ability to be the most skilled team in the world and perhaps the best team in the world.
Yes.
Right? If Tanir is playing his best Counter-Strike, if Zwei is playing his best Counter-Strike, Donk and Shiro, they're playing their best Counter-Strike. They have one of the most stacked rosters individual talent-wise as far as like potential, like the ceiling that is there. But as you kind of indicated, Zwei looks very uncomfortable on this team. And I think with Tanir, it's a little too soon to call. Like, I just don't know if I've seen enough games to like really know exactly what his issue is and where he fits in or what might be an issue. And so, yeah, they need to really iron out their mid to late round protocols and spacing. If they could somehow kind of polish those parts up in their game, I think there's still certainly a threat.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And moving on, the next contender we'll talk about is MOUZ. And I'm doing it in this order because I'm kind of doing this in order of like least likely to win to most likely to win amongst the contenders. And the reality with MOUZ is that they haven't missed a playoff all year. They are insanely consistent at making playoffs. They make a bunch of semis. They made the grand final at Cologne. This team is so consistently good at beating everybody else except for the 4 other teams around them. They struggle against the 4 teams that you would consider to be definitively better in Furia. Well, actually, no, they've only played Furia one time, more on that in just a second. But against Vitality, Falcons, and Spirit, they struggle into that matchup. And so when I look at MOUZ, they live and die by the fact that their CT side is the best in the world, or one of the best in the world. Over the last 6 months, they have one of the highest CT side win rates in the world. But their T side is fucking diabolical at the best. I'm so out on Brolin as a T side caller, and I just dread every time this team moves over to the second half because if Xerxian isn't just pounding entries right out the rip, if Torji and Spinks aren't closing rounds, it feels like they just can't get games over the line.
Yeah, I mean, an interesting stat for them, just really quick, is they've only placed outside of the top 4 a single time since Spinks joined the roster.
Yeah.
And that was the top 8.
The level of consistency is fucking wild.
Yeah. And they've also made, I believe, like 5 grand finals appearances.
I think only one this season, correct? Which was just the clone?
Correct. Yeah. I was dipping into like their first few events together. They made 3 grand finals in a row, the first 3 events at Spinks. And they basically played second fiddle to Vitality, Forever the Bridesmaid story, essentially the first season this year.
Bridesmaids this season. Time.
Yeah, this season, they've kind of continued in that role of like being in the top 4, but kind of similar to like a brief period of last season. They've kind of seen Falcons pass them by. Spirits kind of drop down below them almost in a way as far as like tournament results go. But they
still beat them in their most recent matchup, I believe.
Correct. Yeah. So, I mean, they are like that perennial top 4 team in the world, very likely to make a semifinal, almost guaranteed to make playoffs, unless they get a very unlucky schedule with like their last 2 games or something like that in stage 3. But yeah, as far as actually winning goes, they're similar to Falcons. They're the only other team besides Falcons, like kind of in the contender category that doesn't have a win.
Yeah.
You know? And even Falcons technically has a win last season. But this season they have not, especially with this lineup. So that's the issue. It's like they just don't have that last bit they need to actually consistently make grand finals appearances, and then more importantly, actually put a trophy in the cabinet. They have a load of skill on this team when they're all clicking. Zershin's one of the best entries in the world. Torzy's a great opper with a lot of impact, a little bit more flashy than Chiro in my opinion, but Chiro has the better numbers. You know, I think Spinks is one of the best trade fraggers and just, you know, star CT players that you have in the world right now.
Well, the best clutchers in the world, too. Like,
absolutely.
He backpacks so many of their important games.
And then if Jimmy's in form, he is still one of the best in his role as well.
But noticeably worse than his entry of the year. Like, his 2025 has just been worse.
I agree. Yeah. That's very, very true. But he still has that ability in some matches to take over and, like, kind of show us some of that old Jimmy again. You're right, though. The T size is where they struggle. I mean, that's just, it's very apparent where their handicap is, and I just don't know how you fix that in a boot camp before the major. But maybe they add a little bit more to their playbook and find a way through it.
Yeah, like you can almost see, like, if they just got the most godlike playoff seeding where it's like they're on the side of the bracket and it's like they play a quarterfinals against, I don't know, let's just say Legacy, and then they play a semifinals against Team Spirit. That's like, boom, you can make the grand finals. But if they have to play a Vitality, if they have to play Falcons, if they have to play Furia, it's hard to project them making a grand finals unless they get a very good bracket draw.
To their credit, they did beat Furia at Cologne and they beat Furia at Chengdu.
Yeah, so, okay, yes, that is actually a fair wrinkle.
So I'll give them that. But you're right, and they have occasionally beat Vitality now. Like, it used to be that they could never beat Vitality. Like, the first 6 or 7 series they played against Vitality, they lost. That was last season mostly.
Yep.
And even this season, they lost to Vitality at London. They lost to Vitality at Chengdu. But they also beat Vitality early on in Chengdu. So it's like they occasionally can get a win over Vitality now, whereas before they could never do it. So in that matchup, at least there's a chance. When it comes to Falcons, this version of Falcons that has Kiyosuke, they've lost to them each time that they've played against them.
Yeah.
There was a point way in the beginning where they were beating Falcons. Like, they beat Falcons in the grand finals to win Cluj, for example. That's going way back in ways, right?
Yeah.
That's before they even had Munacy, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're correct.
Yeah, I was back when they still had Dexter. So
Dexter.
It's like that seems like that head-to-head has failed them. You know, the Falcons one has slipped by them. So yeah, they're kind of in a weird spot where it seems matchup based. And I'll just say this: they have enough talent to go deep. They have a good enough map pool to go deep. They have good enough CT sides to go deep. It's just their T sides are struggling, and there are certain head-to-head matchups. So they just seem like they're up against the wall.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that I am a well-documented Mouse hater. I fucking hate watching this team play. So I'm probably a little more pessimistic about Mouse than most. And I think that just comes from the fact that I hate watching their T sides with a passion. So take that with a pinch of salt. I respect how consistent they are, and I really do think that they are a super talented team. I am jaded against them for just never winning anything.
Mouse is just so sad because they're that classic team that, again, we talked about. They're consistently top 4, and they have a pretty talented players, right? And it's like, you feel like you've hit a wall, though, where like maybe you have to consider a roster move. But it's like, if you do the roster move, maybe that's what it would take to get you from consistently top 4 to making finals and maybe even winning. But you could also just fuck up the whole system.
Yeah.
With it, and then like all of a sudden you actually slip down a little bit, and now all of a sudden maybe you're like, you know, a top 10 team, but not a top 4 team anymore if you make the wrong move. And so it's a very delicate situation, I think, that mouse sports find themselves in, due to the fact that it's like, as is, if you know, leave everything alone, they would probably still sit in the top 5 for quite some time. But it's like, at what point do you have aspirations deeper than that? Remember, they're not that long removed from being a feeder team, but then they cut that shit down and they decided to stick with a strong roster and actually build something instead of keep letting their talent go. But now it's like, do you need to take that next step or not? I think this major will tell us a lot.
Yeah, I think so. And I guess if I had to put it this way, this is not the first person to say this, they very much are unlucky in the fact that they've been this good in the same era as Vitality, because they pretty much just play a worse version of Vitality's Counter-Strike, and their stars are just, they're just pound for pound worse than Vitality. So it's just like, you're in that liquid wormhole where you are so good, you're so much better than the other teams, but there's one team that is generational above you. And it's like, fuck, like, what are you going to do about that?
Yep.
Moving on, our final contender before we move over to the favorites tier, and that is the Falcons. And the Falcons, I think, are bordering on favorites. If they could have won one of these events leading into the major, I'd be more willing to put them into the favorite tier. But it's the one thing that keeps hurting the Falcons is they'll be very consistent, they'll be very good throughout the entirety of the tournament, but then they'll have that one match where there is just a prolific fuck up round, or, you know, Nico or Muncie goes missing, and they lose a game that feels like they should be more competitive in, or even winning. Like, they fail to put it together in like that supreme moment.
Yeah, they're an interesting one because they're a team, an organization that historically struggled a lot in Counter-Strike coming into this year. And then there was a point in the first season of this year where, even as they were going through like some roster transitions, they basically like flew up their rankings and were right next to Mouse Sports fighting for number 2 in the world. Yep. Like, there was a stretch of tournaments where they were, you know, potentially surpassing Mouse Sports for number 2 in the world. Like, if you think it like, you know, how they won that PGL Bucharest event, they made the grand finals of that Melbourne event. They did the same thing at Rivals Copenhagen. They were top 4 at IEM Dallas. Like, they were on a run there. But then, you know, the Fire Nation attacked. And that Fire Nation was a team that knocked them out of contention of the Blast Austin Major, and that was made in Brazil. Yep. Shout out one time. And then this season, though, they built themselves up into 4th place or best every tournament they've played the last like 5 or 6 lands. And they have a buttload of talent. Like we already know that.
Talent, yeah.
Like, I mean, Muncie is back to being potentially the best opera in the world.
Muncie's probably a top 2 player in the world right now. Like, you could argue he's even top 1, honestly. With Donk having to slip the last like month, Muncie might be the best player statistically right now at this moment heading into the major.
That's very, very debatable, yeah, and I agree that it could be true. I also think that a really cool thing about Muncie is he's probably the most aggressive opper of all of them.
Unbelievably aggressive. Like, what was
he goes for a ton of openings, and his success rate's very high
on both sides.
And it's like, yeah, this is like, I don't want to bore your viewers with numbers and like make them drool and go to sleep, but like, just to give you like on average, even like you would say Mado is a pretty flashy aggressive opper, right?
Yeah.
So operas kind of like Maladoy, even Torzi would maybe fit this category as well. We all know Shear's a more passive opera, right? If we're doing like comparisons. Some of these like more aggressive operas, their opening attempt rate on the CT side is always usually pretty high. It's like in like the mid 20% range. And Muncie fits that billing as well. Like, he goes for a lot of opening CT side. He's very successful. The thing that sets him apart, though, is that most aggressive operas, even on the T side, will play a little bit more second, third fiddle to like their true entry rifler on the team, right? Like, those are guys who are going to be taking a heavy amount of opening attempts, and so theirs is going to be a little bit more in like the high teens, let's say, like, you know, let's say 17-18%, something like that. Muncie's like 22%. He's like, it's statistically significant how much more he goes for openings on T side than some of these other operas in the world right now, and he's extremely successful at it. So when you have that going for you, and you have Kiyosuke, who is hitting the ground running pretty quick, in my opinion. Like, you know, he ain't no dog, but he is still doing very well in his aggressive rifling roles. And then you have Nico, that we all know he's capable of being one of the best riflers in the world. He's had his flops. We all know what happened against Fury at Rivals Hong Kong in that grand final with Nico completely falling off a cliff. So we've seen the bad, and that's going to be what's most recent in everyone's mind. But you also have to rewind back and understand like what Nico can do, right? And Kixon's actually one of the better fragging IGLs in the world right now.
Yeah,
he popped off against Fury in that grand final.
He really did.
And he's had some other moments like that throughout the course of this year where it's like, yeah, this guy's actually pretty legit. And Tessis has had a hard one, man. He's gone from being like more of a focal player when he was on Heroic to having to be an anchor / extremity player, which is something he was not used to having to do. And he's actually done it pretty admirably, in my opinion. So this team has a buttload of firepower, a very high ceiling, and they have a pretty damn good map pool. Like, they have like 4 maps that they're really strong on right now. So yeah, this team could do big things. Like, this could maybe be the moment that they realize everything and finally do get the trophy, the biggest of all.
So I have to add a couple of caveats, and I hate to play spoiler to your enthusiasm, but I think this is worth pointing out. I think Thorne said this recently on Snake and Banner too. m0NESY, not just Nico, m0NESY is noticeably worse at majors compared to his average output. He has not been m0NESY at most of the majors he's competed at. So, and he was really bad at Austin. But that's, some people say it's like extenuating circumstances with the whole like sleep schedule controversy. But whether that's kind of neither here nor there, but it's still worth pointing out. And then obviously Nico, while consistent in the group stages, is just worse in big games. Like, it just seems like if you get down to those big tense matches, Nico does not seem to play like Nico. And this is going to be Kyosuke's first major. So there's a lot here where it's like, could just shit go nuclearly wrong with Falcons? I don't think that's impossible.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would say to that is when it comes to the whole m0NESY conversation, I'll start with that one really quick. He actually did have a banging Copenhagen major when they placed top 4.
Right. I think that's actually the outlier.
So we'll say that. Also, even at the Shanghai major, other than their loss to FaZe in the semifinals?
Yes.
He played a very good major otherwise, outside of that as well. And then when it comes to the Blast Austin major, the most recent one, he just had such a cold start in those BO1s, man. I mean, but he picked it up in their last 2, like the rest of the OG series, he was fantastic. And then even that Made in Brazil loss, it wasn't him, bro, in my opinion. So I think there's truth to what was said about m0NESY, but I do think that I'm willing to bet that this major will probably go better for him. But the Nico one is just tough because it's lasted for so many years.
Yeah.
Where he's had these struggles in big games, especially in like the finals or elimination best of 3s and stuff like that, where it's just like, man. And it's almost gotten to the point now where you wonder, like, should he be considering that IGL transition now? Like, is he at that point yet? I think this major will tell us a lot about that. So you make very fair criticisms and fair points. But I will say, like, even though there's a lot of Falcons hate watchers out there, and I totally get it, you know,
I might say you're one of them, yeah.
I was the perennial hate watcher. We all know that moment where I said hope dies last, and I called that Made Brazil could still win. They want to talk about that.
Some might say you hate harder than most people, yeah.
Some say that I self-actualized, and I may have willed in that loss that Falcons had against Made Brazil at the Blast Austin major. But we all knew that Falcons was inevitable because of the spending power that they have and the talent that they've assembled. And they're starting to get to that point where they could turn the corner. Yeah. And they could really make some stuff work. I put it this way, like, and we can wrap it up here because we've been on Falcons a lot. I guarantee you that they will make playoffs this time.
Yeah, I think so.
And it is very, very likely they'll, depending on who they match up against in the quarterfinals, it's very likely they're top 4 at worst at this tournament.
Yeah, I do think that they are maybe one of the teams most hurt by best of 5 grand finals, though. I feel like that's where the tension gets the highest. Their map pool is okay. It's not the deepest, but it's just like, I feel like it's hard to have much faith in Nico in these grand finals right now, and he's going to be required. They're going to need the whole team to perform.
Yeah, I mean, they have a really good Ancient, a really good Mirage, and a really good Nuke. So if they can line those 3 maps up in the best of 5, I think that would be how they do it. But you are correct that their Dust 2's been kind of struggling lately. They only recently started playing Inferno, and it hasn't gone well for them. And their train is very hit or miss. So there's definitely some discrepancies out there. You're right.
But I think what we should do here, because we've been going for almost an hour now, is we're going to do Furia and Vitality together, because these are the 2 favorites. I don't think anyone is going to deny that. These are the two best teams of this season. Furia are coming off the back of a fucking three-peat in their last 3 tournaments. They won the Fisher Playground 2 Thunderpick World Championship, and then most recently they just won Hong Kong.
And Chengdu.
And Chengdu. Yeah, sorry. Chengdu. Yeah. So, yeah. That's
the 4 titles.
4 titles. It was
You're
3 in a
good.
row. Thunderpick, Chengdu, and Hong Kong. So, and then they've made a bunch of playoffs. They have the best cohesion out of any team in the world. Their team play is arguably the best. I think they have the best IGL right now in Fallen. Molodoy is just an insane X Factor. Yakinda, Resurrected Screw. We've all been over this. We all know how good Furia are. And
We've
then
been glazing
Vitality,
Furia on our respective YouTube channels now for like the last 3 weeks.
Listen,
there's a lot of content out there about us.
They have deserved every ounce of the glaze.
Oh, they have 100%.
And then Vitality, they're just the most consistent team in the world. They are immune to going out before the semifinals. Their team play, admittedly, has been worryingly like up and down. Like they've had moments where it looks like they haven't been confident in each other, and the communication seems to be a little up and down. You have a lot of variance from players like Apex. I think Rops has actually kind of flown under the radar in terms of criticism because he's been good still, but he hasn't been like amazing in a way that he was throughout most of the first half of this year. But again, it's hard to see Vitality losing to pretty much anybody other than occasionally Mouse and Furia.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to go too deep on this because we've already done a lot of content about Furia and Vitality. And for those of you out there who want deeper analysis from us on these teams, just go look at our most recent videos about Furia, and that'll give it to you.
All right there.
Where we go real deep into it. But let's be clear. These are clearly the 2 best teams in the world. Furia dominated the season with 4 wins. No one else got even close to that. Vitality only has 1 win, but they have never placed outside of the top 4, and they're obviously off the back of the most dominant season of Counter-Strike ever played, the first season of this year. And while they have certainly, fallen below that level, they are still, the number 2 team in the world, in my opinion, behind Furia. Both these teams have an incredible amount of talent that play very consistently. These are the 2 best map pools in the world as well, by the way, between Furia and Vitality. They both have incredible oppers that are aggressive. Yakindar, like you said, for Furia has been an incredible entry rifler. Yuri's been a luxury, like 3rd, 4th best player on your team who is a great role player. Case Hirado is an extremely versatile rifler who's at the peak of his powers right now, in my opinion. When you go over to Vitality, the one thing that I would say is Flames has some of the worst entry conversion rates of any entry fragger in the top 10 right now. And that's very worrying for me on the T side because I think that puts more stress on Apex and Ziwu to make those openings happen when he's unable to convert on his opening duels. So that's something to look out for, as well as just in general, they haven't looked as sharp as they did, in the first season this year. But to be fair, that's like so hard to match. Like, how are you going to match the best season ever? You know what I mean? Like, I think we do have to give a little bit of grace there because of just how impossible it would be to repeat that, in my opinion. But yeah, these are clearly the 2 best teams in the world. It's not even close, and very likely the winner will be one of these 2 teams.
Yeah, I would even go as far as say I feel like this is not even that much of a reach. One of these 2 teams is going to be in the grand finals. I'd be very surprised if neither of these 2 teams made it to the grand finals.
Yeah, they could easily.
It's
both
very
be,
likely.
That would be fantastic. By the way, put them on opposite ends of the bracket.
Oh my god,
let them fight.
Yeah.
Look. I think the team that has the best chance of making sure they don't make one of these teams don't make the grand finals is like if Falcons click. Like Falcons are also a grand finalist contender in my opinion. The same could be said for Spirit and Mouse, obviously, if everything fires on all cylinders. But yeah, I mean, it's so like these are the 2 clear favorites. It's not even close. Yeah,
and then just to kind of round things out and close out the video, it feels like despite that, they can lose. They're vulnerable. Sure. In a way that Vitality simply weren't in the first half of this year. And I feel like we are just in for this could be one of the best majors ever. This could go down as one of the most competitive majors we've ever had.
I agree with that 100%. The between these top 5 teams, like it's wide open.
Yep. All right. Well, I think we're gonna go ahead and cap it off there. If you guys could do me a solid, in the links in the description as well as in the pinned comment, go check out Dust's content over on YouTube. Follow him on Twitter. He'll be pumping out a lot of content during the major cycle. You can also catch him on PGL broadcasts throughout most of next year. So Dust, he's out there. He's doing things. Thank you for sitting down and talking to me today.
Absolutely, bro. Thanks for having me.
Perfect. Make sure you guys take a second, leave a like, leave a comment down below. Subscribe to the channel already. Help me at 10K subs by the end of the year. Thank you to our channel members. You guys know who you are. I won't name it off today, so we can just wrap this up. If you want to support me directly, it's the #1 way to do so for $5 a month. You get your name usually at the end of the video just like this, as well as a custom role in our community Discord. Follow me on twitch.tv/LionHeartZS2. I stream almost every day at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Come check me out there. I'll see you guys soon for the major coverage. Have a great day. Peace.